Let's talk about why plant churches. I suppose most of us believe in planting churches, but we really need to bring home the question of why it's so important that every one of us should be interested in planting churches, partnering with those who do plant churches, and as a movement working together to make sure we're successful in this vital area. Of course, we should start with the Great Commission. Jesus told us to go into all the world and preach the gospel to everyone. He told us to teach all nations, literally meaning to make disciples of all the nations. So we have a commission as the people of God to reach souls by every means possible. And of course, the United Pentecostal Church International was founded on this premise. Our mission is specifically to proclaim the whole gospel to the whole world by the whole church. And then we look at our own land, look at the United States and Canada. We have about 350 million people. Sometimes we may think of this area as relatively evangelized or relatively churched. But let's consider it from this approach. Let's say our goal was to get only 1% of that population physically in our churches. Only 1% of the population. Well, if you divide 350 million by 1%, then that will give you the target number that we're looking at. And then you say, well, the average church has about 100 members. Actually, that overstates the case a little bit, but we'll round up. So if we're looking for enough churches of approximately 100 people in attendance to house 1% of the population, so you divide again by 100, what you find out is we need 35,000 churches in the U.S. and Canada just to meet our goal of reaching 1% of the population, which I suggest is a relatively modest goal. Right now we have about 4,300 churches, including daughter works and a few preaching points that are on record. So you can see just from that basis, we have much room to grow. Why plant a church? Because we only have 4,000 or so. We need 35,000 just to reach 1% of the population. Now, let's go a little bit further and say that planting churches is the most effective method of long-term growth. If we want to see the kingdom of God grow, and if we want to see the United Pentecostal Church grow, over the long term, the best way to do that is to plant more churches. Studies have shown that if you go into a metro area and establish one megachurch over the years, and then you go to a similar metro area and try to plant as many churches as possible, what you find out in the long term, the metro area that has many churches will always have a greater total church attendance than the metro area that has one megachurch. And I'm speaking of studies comparing within a certain denomination. So my solution to this, or my response to this, is to say we should grow large churches. We should grow them as big as we can. But that should not be our only focus. It doesn't need to be either or. It needs to be both and. Plant churches that can be strong hubs, that can be mother churches, that can be major resources, that can become mega churches, that can establish a reputation that's known all over the metro area, or all over the community. But at the same time, use that base as leverage for starting preaching points and daughter works so that you can have the best of both worlds. You can have some large churches which attract lots of attention and have lots of resources, but at the same time you have more locations, because over time more locations will always translate into greater growth. It's not only a matter of the physical location, but each church has its own character, its own personality, its own style of ministry, its own pastoral style. Each church has a different level of effectiveness in reaching different kinds of people. Every church should try to reach everyone of every socioeconomic status and every ethnicity. But the fact is that certain churches are better at reaching certain types of people. And so by having a mix of churches, we can be more effective overall in reaching more people in more ways, in more locations. And so I'm urging everyone to find a way to do outreach. Every child of God should do that. Every pastor should do that. We can do that through home Bible studies, through home friendship groups, and so on. But then I'm urging every pastor to think strategically as a Bible study or a home friendship group or people of a certain ethnicity seem to be responsive. look for an opportunity to do more than maybe winning one or two souls, but look for an opportunity to plant a new church. And every minister should look at that, look at doing outreach, but also look at ways to start churches under a senior pastor or to launch out in a home missions endeavor. We have so many options now. It's not an all or nothing approach where you go to an unknown place and start from scratch, but we can start with a preaching point, simply a regular service to explore what will develop from that. We can start or transition to a daughter work, which at that point there is an intention to plant a church. And then finally we can transition to a home missions church after that preaching point or daughter work has proven to have stability and success. In summary, we need to plant churches because planting churches is the most effective way of fulfilling the Great Commission and fulfilling the mission of the United Pentecostal Church International. And finally, I would submit to you that by planting churches, we establish a base for all ministries. We're more effective in global missions. We're more effective in Sunday school, youth ministry, Tupelo Children's Mansion, Lighthouse Ranch for boys, everything you could think of. We're more effective if we have more churches in the U.S. and Canada. For the long-term health of our fellowship and growth of the kingdom of God, every single one of us should be deeply interested in planting new churches.